Hello, my name is Wildstag, and thank you for tuning in to another used book rant. Today I'm going to be talking about this book, The Iron Wolves. It's a book one in the Rage of Kings. The author is Andy Remick. The cover art is by Lee Gibbons, and this book is from 2014. So I'll start with a first impression about this book, which is to say, I got this at Coas in the fantasy section, and I thought from just the blurb I was reading that this is going to be dark fantasy, and it is. It is a dark fantasy setting, but I'm not... I like dark fantasy to some degree. This book is dark fantasy of the sort that I really just don't gel with. The Iron Wolves is kind of like the Dota Netflix animation. What I mean by that is, in the Dota series from Netflix, there's just constant cursing, constant dropping the F word, insults. It's just swearing for the sake of it rather than swearing to enhance conversation. It's bad writing, is basically what that is. The action is interesting in the Dota series, but the writing is just abysmal. And in The Iron Wolves, that's the impression I get of it. The action is very interestingly written. Each of the main characters from this band called the Iron Wolves, each of them has a unique characteristic in the way they fight. The main character is, as much as there is a main character, the first character introduced is a brawler. He's big, strong, wields an axe. He fights, he just blanks, and he pummels everything he can. And the story opens on him talking with his brother and them throwing threats back and forth like they've been threatening to kill the other all their lives. And really they have. Both brothers are big, strong guys, but one of them went off to join the military and the other stayed at home to take care of their mother. So even though he's got a very civilian personality, he's always looked up to his brother and his brother's comrades as heroes, and he kind of wants to participate in that. And so when an eldritch abomination, I think it's like a deer that comes in, but the deer is haggard. It looks almost like the if you've ever seen Wildermyth, the game Wildermyth, the Gorgon deer enemy is kind of how the deer in this is described. And so these two brothers work together to bring down this monstrosity in a town, and that's when they realize they kind of need to get the band back together. And throughout the book, it's 450 pages of content. Throughout the book, they're aging. He's like 80 something now, but their former general is trying to get the band back together because during his birthday celebration, he's got all these guests over and one of these monstrosities attacks him as well. And the general had received warning from an oracle who gave a very prophetic message to him. And the way he interprets it is they need to go back to this old fortress that they used to train and defend at, and defend against a newer threat. The Iron Wolves are being gathered. There's, like I said, each of them has a different fighting style, a different aspect that makes them unique. One of them is a very nimble, graceful fighter, precise and pinpoint attacks. Another is kind of sadistic and torturous and implied cannibalistic to some degree. And then there's another that he uses a sword, but instead of being incredibly graceful like the one person, and instead of being like just a barbaric raging whirlwind of death like the axe wielder, this sword wielder is measured, controlled, and powerful, but in a disciplined sense. But he's lost a lot. So his wife had been sleeping around with, actually, one of his brothers, one of the members of this group. That guy that wields the axe, that older brother that went off to war, had been sleeping with one of his Bond brothers' wives. And so there's this tension between the two of them because the husband wants to kill his former comrade and hates his comrade, and the former comrade is just living life by going from one fight to the next. And so there's this disciplined, powerful sword user, the immensely strong and uncontrolled axe wielder. There's a lady that throws knives and is excellent with her daggers and knives. There's another who's very like precise and measured with his attacks. There's another who is just a pretty standard sword and shield kind of person. Each of them are amazing warriors, but each of them is also an amazing warrior in a different way. And so they're traveling across the country to stop a threat that they had once thought eradicated. And the story bounces between them and the villain, who is this witch who can combine people and creatures together. And so at one point she comes across these nomads who the king of these nomads tries to command this villainess, and she combines him with his horse, and he ends up like a centaur looking guy with like one of the horse's legs is actually his human leg, and then so it's like one human leg and 3 horse legs, and he's got his hands, but he's also got like the horse's the horse's neck infused and fused with his spine. And so it's a nightmarish chimera, and everyone else gets combined like this as well. One of the king's lieutenants ends up combined with a lion, and all of these creatures, because they have so much pain, the only thing that can stall that pain is eating and hurting others. And so she ends up controlling a kingdom and then sacrificing that kingdom to this magical pit where humans go in, orcs come out, and these orcs just, they have minds, but they just go in, smash things, beat things up, drag humans back to the pit, make more of them. They also don't really have a death per se. Every orc that comes out of that pit has lived a previous life, and thus has all that skill and knowledge of a previous life. And so that's what the Iron Wolves are up against. And I like that. It's really cool. The story, the idea of it is really amazing. But like I said, there's just swearing constantly, and it doesn't add to the conversation. It's just bad writing, bad dialogue. And everyone's, screwing, everyone's trying to kill each other. Even the protagonists, the good guys, so to speak, are terrible people. They're, just really bad at being good people. The only reason they're the good guys is because they were amazing at defending this fortress. So you've got these dark fantasy heroes and this apocalyptic setting, but really bad dialogue. And the ending I just did not like at all. The ending, it's a Deus Ex Machina, and there's no build up to it. There's no, like, it plays itself off like, oh, you should have seen this coming. There's nothing. I've reread this. There is nothing building up to the idea that they end up stopping the villainous the way they do. And it also implies that it's not a permanent defeat and some other stuff. They have to leave room for it to become a book too. But I compare this book, as far as dark fantasy goes, to something like The Vagrant, which focuses on just a very small handful of characters. In that one, it's apocalyptic. The demons have already won and are spreading and encroaching upon this civilized and powerful nation that can only protect so many people. And the demons are constantly battering at those walls and minimizing the amount of territory the human empire controls as safe for its citizens. The outlying areas are dying to these demons, being fed to them, and there's only so much they can do. And in The Vagrant, it's a small cast of one person who doesn't talk, the baby he's trying to bring to safety, to shelter, the one character that does talk and is kind of the voice for the unspeaking vagrant. And I've talked about that novel, and it's a good one. It sticks with me, and I really like the idea that the main character, the hero, doesn't get a name. And in this one, there's so many names, but it doesn't even really matter because they have these interpersonal relationships, but the dialogue is atrocious. They're just really shitty people. It's a good concept, but a bad delivery, and really the ending is just not great. So The Iron Wolves, I didn't really like. I paid only about, $4.50 for this, so not too much, but it just wasn't intriguing. And there aren't even really any portions that I want to point to as any good writing or a part that stood out to me. I've read it twice because I wanted to make sure that that Deus Ex Machina ending really didn't have any foreshadowing. And looking at it now, the only foreshadowing I think in this book for the ending is the cover art. That is really the only thing that hints at how the ending is going to play out. And I didn't like that at all. There is actually one part that I do like, and it shifts perspectives very poorly. There's very few line breaks, so the perspective will jump to a different character without really any indication that it's jumping to a different character. But there is a perspective that they keep on bouncing back to, which is that there are these soldiers at that fortress that the Iron Wolves used to defend. And those guys, one of them is a farmer who fell on bad times and is in the military because it is a stable income for his family. And the other guy, he doesn't have a family, but with that in mind, these two, I guess really comrades, are discussing what's going on at the fortress. They are the eyes and ears for the reader at the fortress as the story is going on. And the fortress is at an all-time low for manning. It's at an all-time low in morale. they know that there's an enemy coming, and yet they're given no reinforcements. And they're even told to stop defending at one point. And so these two soldiers, you get to see their perspectives and realize we're going to die here if help doesn't come. But at least I made maybe not a friend, but a person I could talk to in my last weeks. And so, it's a dark fantasy. Friends don't really happen easily. And these guys aren't necessarily friends, but they find a bond in the darkest hours of their lives. And so that was actually kind of interesting, but like I said, there's no line breaks between the perspective shifts, and so really it's hard to keep track of what perspective is the one you're following. The dialogue is just garbage, and the ending is atrocious. So all in all, the Iron Wolves, very interesting concept, very decent setting. I loved a lot of the action, the way it was described, but it is not a book I would want to read again. And honestly, I feel like it's one of those that I can put back into the system. It's in very good condition. There's no notes in it, no nothing. I can get, some decent credit for more books off of this one. That's the Iron Wolves. I didn't like it, but if you did like it, let me know how you feel in the comments. Anyway, my name is Wildstag, and thank you for tuning in to another used book rant.